My name is Margaret. I'm 72 years old, and 3 days ago I woke up in a hospital bed after emergency surgery to find out that my daughter Rebecca had sold my house. Not next month, not next week. She sold it while I was unconscious, while doctors were still monitoring my vitals, while I was too weak to even hold a phone. The house I'd lived in for 43 years, the house where I raised her and her brother, the house my late husband Tom and I bought with our first combined savings of $12,000 back in 1982, gone. Sold to strangers for $375,000, and my daughter pocketed every single cent. If you're watching this video right now, write in the comments where you are and what time it is. I need to know I'm not alone in this nightmare that just became my reality. But here's what Rebecca didn't know, what she couldn't have known because I hadn't told anyone yet. Exactly 24 hours before she signed those papers, I had changed my will. Yesterday morning at 10:15 a.m., I sat in my lawyer's office weak, struggling to breathe, knowing something was terribly wrong with my body, and I signed new documents that removed Rebecca as my primary beneficiary. I gave everything to my granddaughter Emma instead, Rebecca's own daughter, the only person in my family who visited me in the hospital without asking about my assets first. The timing is so cruel it almost feels like a cosmic joke. If my surgery had been scheduled just 1 day later, if I had collapsed just 24 hours after I did, my new will would have been fully processed and Rebecca's sale would have been legally impossible. But instead, I went into emergency surgery on Tuesday afternoon, and by Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., Rebecca had already rushed through the house sale before my updated will entered the legal system at noon. 3 hours. That's how close I came to protecting everything I'd worked for my entire life. Let me take you back to how this all started, because nobody just wakes up one day and decides to sell their mother's house while she's fighting for her life. This has been building for months, maybe years, and I was too blind to see it, too desperate to believe my own daughter still loved me beyond what I could provide. It started 6 months ago, when Rebecca suddenly became very interested in my living situation. She would visit, something she rarely did, and walk through my house with this concerned expression, touching the walls, checking the windows, commenting on every small repair that needed to be done. "Mom, this banister is loose. Mom, there's a crack in the bathroom tile. Mom, this roof is going to need replacement soon." Every visit was an inspection, a documentation of problems I'd lived with comfortably for years. "You're getting older," she'd say, with that voice people use when they're pretending to care. "This house is too much for you. All these stairs, this big yard, the maintenance costs. Have you thought about downsizing? Maybe a nice assisted living community where you'd have people around, where someone else handles all the repairs?" I should have seen it then. I should have recognized that she wasn't worried about my safety. She was worried about her inheritance depreciating. Every crack in the wall, every loose floorboard, every old appliance was money lost in her eyes. She wasn't seeing her childhood home. She was seeing a deteriorating asset that needed to be liquidated before it lost more value. But I trusted her. God help me. I trusted my own daughter. When she suggested I give her power of attorney, just in case something happens, I actually considered it. She brought the papers to my house, had them all prepared by her lawyer friend, and sat at my kitchen table explaining how this was just a precaution, how it would make everything easier if I ever had a medical emergency and couldn't make decisions for myself. I didn't sign them. Something in my gut, some instinct I couldn't name, made me hesitate. "Let me think about it," I told her, and I watched her face change. The concerned daughter disappeared for just a moment, and I saw something else underneath frustration, maybe even anger. But then she smiled and said, "Of course, Mom. Take all the time you need. I just want to protect you." 2 weeks later, I started having trouble breathing. It began as a slight shortness of breath when I climbed the stairs. Nothing alarming at first. I'm 72. Some physical decline is normal, but it got worse quickly. Within days, I couldn't walk from my bedroom to the bathroom without stopping to rest. I couldn't catch my breath. My chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it. I called Rebecca because she'd told me to call her if I ever needed anything. "Mom, it's probably just anxiety," she said. "You've been stressed about the house situation. Why don't you rest for a few days and see if it gets better?" She didn't offer to come check on me. She didn't suggest I see a doctor. She told me to rest. But Emma, my granddaughter, had come by that weekend to bring me groceries, something she did every Sunday without being asked, without expecting anything in return. She took one look at me and said, "Grandma, you're gray. We're going to the hospital right now." I tried to protest. Hospital visits are expensive and my insurance doesn't cover everything. But Emma literally held my arm and walked me to her car. "I don't care about the cost," she said. "You're more important than money." Those words. When was the last time someone in my family had said something like that to me? When was the last time my own daughter had treated me like I was worth more than my bank account balance? At the emergency room, they did tests immediately. The doctor's face was serious when he came back with results. "Mrs. Patterson, you have a significant pulmonary embolism, blood clots in your lungs. You need emergency surgery right now. If you had waited even another day or two, this could have been fatal." Everything happened so fast after that. Consent forms, preparation for surgery, anesthesia. Emma held my hand and promised she'd be there when I woke up. I remember thinking as they wheeled me into the operating room that I needed to do something important. There was something I needed to change, something urgent, but I couldn't remember what it was through the fog of pain and medication. I survived the surgery. The doctors removed the clots and said I was incredibly lucky. But I was weak, so weak I could barely press the call button for the nurse. I drifted in and out of consciousness for 2 days, and every time I opened my eyes, Emma was there. Sometimes sleeping in the chair beside my bed, sometimes reading, sometimes just holding my hand. My daughter Rebecca came once, stayed for 15 minutes, asked the nurses questions about my mental state and my capacity to make decisions, then left. I should have known then. I should have understood what those questions meant. On my 3rd day in the hospital, when I was finally conscious enough to think clearly, Emma helped me make a phone call to my lawyer, David Morrison. I'd worked with David for 20 years. He handled my will when Tom died, helped me with property matters, and had always been honest with me even when the truth was uncomfortable. "David," I said, my voice still weak from the breathing tube they'd removed, "I need to change my will. I need to do it today." There was a pause on the line. "Margaret, are you sure you're in a condition to make these kinds of decisions? You've just had major surgery." "I'm completely clear-headed," I told him, and I was. The pain medication made my body feel distant, but my mind was sharp with a clarity I hadn't experienced in months. I want to remove Rebecca as my primary beneficiary. I want everything to go to Emma instead, the house, my savings, everything. Can you bring the papers to the hospital today? Another pause. "Margaret, this is a significant change. Can I ask what prompted this?" I told him about the last 6 months, the constant pressure about the house, the suggestions about assisted living, the power of attorney papers, Rebecca's strange questions to my nurses about my mental capacity. I told him about Emma, who visited every week without wanting anything, who had probably saved my life by bringing me to the hospital. "I'll be there in 2 hours," David said. "And Margaret, I think you're making the right decision." He arrived at 1 p.m. with the papers. Emma stepped out to give us privacy, though I asked David to have her witness the signature. I wanted her to know, to understand that this wasn't a whim or confusion from medication. This was the most deliberate decision I'd made in years. I signed the new will at 2:30 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. David explained that it would need to be filed and processed, which would happen Wednesday morning. By noon tomorrow, he said, these will be your legal final wishes. Everything will be protected. By noon tomorrow. Those words felt safe, like a shield I'd just put in place. I could rest now. I could focus on recovering, knowing that my house, my savings, everything I'd worked for would go to someone who actually loved me, not just loved what I could give her. I fell asleep that afternoon feeling peaceful for the first time in months. Emma sat beside me reading a book, and the last thing I remembered before drifting off was her gentle voice saying, "Rest, Grandma. I'm not going anywhere." But while I slept, while my body tried to heal from surgery, while David's paperwork sat in a processing queue waiting for official filing, Rebecca was making moves I couldn't have imagined. She'd already contacted a real estate agent 3 weeks earlier. I found this out later from phone records Emma helped me access. She'd already gotten the house appraised. She'd already found a buyer willing to pay cash for a quick sale. All she needed was the right moment, a window when I couldn't stop her, couldn't question her, couldn't protect what was mine. And my emergency surgery gave her exactly that. Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., while I was still in the hospital recovering, Rebecca went to my house with keys I'd given her years ago for emergencies. She let herself in and spent 3 hours going through my personal papers. She found my property deed, my insurance documents, everything she needed. At 9 a.m., she met with the real estate agent and the buyers at a title company office. She signed papers as my power of attorney papers I had never actually signed, papers she'd had forged by someone, though I couldn't prove that yet. By 9:45 a.m., the sale was complete. My house, the house where I'd celebrated 43 Christmases, where I'd nursed my husband through his final illness, where I'd watched my children and grandchildren grow up sold to complete strangers for $375,000. The money went directly into an account Rebecca had set up, an account I didn't even know existed. At noon, David's paperwork finished processing. My new will became official. If Rebecca had waited just 3 more hours, the sale would have been impossible. If I had changed my will just 1 day earlier, she would have been blocked. But that 3-hour window was all she needed to take everything. I didn't find out until Thursday afternoon. I woke up from a nap and saw Emma sitting in the chair beside my bed with tears running down her face. She was holding her phone, staring at it like it contained the worst news imaginable. "Grandma," she whispered, "Mom sold your house. It's gone." The words didn't make sense at first. My brain, still foggy from pain medication and exhaustion, couldn't process what Emma was saying. Sold your house. Those 3 words felt like they were in a foreign language, a combination that couldn't possibly apply to my reality. "What do you mean sold?" I asked, trying to sit up in the hospital bed, immediately feeling the sharp pain in my chest from the surgery incisions. "Emma, what are you talking about?" She turned her phone screen toward me, and I saw a real estate listing marked with a bright red banner. Sold. There was my house, my beautiful blue house with the white shutters Tom had painted the summer before he died, the oak tree in the front yard where we'd hung a tire swing for the kids, the porch where I'd spent countless evenings watching the sunset with a cup of tea, all of it labeled as sold, past tense, already gone. When? That was all I could manage to say. My throat felt tight, like I was choking on the word. "Yesterday morning," Emma said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Mom did it yesterday morning. I just found out because one of your neighbors, Mrs. Chen, called me asking if you were okay. She said she saw moving trucks and strangers walking through your house with keys, and she was worried something had happened to you." Yesterday morning. Wednesday morning. The same morning my new will was being processed. The same morning I was lying in this hospital bed, too weak to even feed myself, thinking I was safe because I'd finally taken action to protect what was mine. While I was sleeping peacefully, believing I'd secured my granddaughter's future, my daughter was erasing that future with forged signatures and lies. How could she do this? I asked, but even as the words came out, I knew the answer. Rebecca had been planning this for months. Every concerned visit, every suggestion about downsizing, every comment about the house being too much for me, it was all preparation for this moment. She'd been laying groundwork, building a narrative that I was declining, that I needed help, that selling the house was somehow in my best interest. Emma's hands were shaking as she scrolled through her phone. "Grandma, there's more. I called the title company that handled the sale. They said Mom came in with power of attorney documents that gave her the right to sell the property on your behalf. They said she told them you were mentally unfit to make decisions and that this sale was necessary to pay for your long-term care." Mentally unfit. Those words hit me like a physical blow. My own daughter had declared me incompetent to strangers, had used my medical emergency as proof that I couldn't manage my own affairs. The same daughter I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally for 50 years, had just told the world that her mother was too mentally gone to be trusted with her own property. "The documents," I said, my mind suddenly sharp despite the medication. "Emma, I never signed any power of attorney papers for Rebecca. She brought them to me 2 months ago, but I refused. I told her I needed to think about it, and I never signed anything." Emma's face went pale. "Then how did she have them? How did the title company accept them?" "She forged them," I said, and saying it out loud made it real. "She had them prepared, probably waited for the right moment, and then forged my signature. Or maybe she had someone else forge it. But those signatures aren't mine." I watched Emma's expression change from shock to something harder, colder. She'd always defended her mother, always made excuses for Rebecca's selfishness, always believed that underneath the demanding exterior was a woman who truly cared about her family. But this was beyond making excuses. "We need to call the police," Emma said, standing up so quickly the chair scraped against the floor. "This is fraud. This is theft. She can't just forge documents and steal your house." But even as she said it, I felt a deep exhaustion that had nothing to do with my surgery. "Emma, honey, sit down. Let me think." She sat, but I could see the anger radiating from her, the desire to immediately fix this, to punish her mother for what she'd done. I loved her even more in that moment for her fierce loyalty, but I knew the reality was more complicated than just calling the police and having Rebecca arrested. "The title company accepted those documents," I said slowly, working through the legal implications in my mind. "They had no reason to question them. For all they knew, Rebecca was acting in my best interest, selling the house to pay for my medical care. Even if the signatures are forged, proving that in court will take time, will take money, and will tear this family completely apart." "The family is already torn apart," Emma said fiercely. "Mom tore it apart when she decided to steal from you." She was right, of course, but 50 years of being a mother doesn't disappear overnight. Even now, even knowing what Rebecca had done, part of me wanted to believe there was some explanation, some justification I wasn't seeing. Maybe she really did believe she was helping me. Maybe she thought selling the house quickly was the best option. Maybe, no. I stopped that line of thinking immediately. I was doing it again, making excuses for inexcusable behavior, trying to find innocence where there was only calculated greed. Rebecca hadn't sold my house to help me. She'd sold it to enrich herself, to get her hands on my assets before my new will could protect them, and she'd done it in the narrow window when I was most vulnerable. "Call David Morrison," I told Emma. Tell him what happened. Tell him I need him here today, right now if possible." While Emma made the call, I lay back against the pillows and tried to process the magnitude of what had happened. $375,000. That's what the house sold for, according to the listing Emma had shown me. A fair price, maybe even slightly below market value, which meant Rebecca had prioritized speed over getting the best deal. She wanted that money in her hands as quickly as possible. But it wasn't just about the money, I realized. It was about control, about power, about finally having complete access to everything I'd built. For years, Rebecca had watched me live in that house, knowing that one day it would be hers. But one day wasn't good enough. She wanted it now, wanted to make decisions about my life without my interference, wanted to be the one in charge. The irony was devastating. Just yesterday, I'd changed my will specifically to prevent this. I'd recognized Rebecca's true nature, had seen clearly for the first time that my daughter viewed me as an asset rather than a person, and I'd acted on that recognition, had taken legal steps to protect myself and reward Emma for her genuine love and care. But I'd acted one day too late. David Morrison arrived at the hospital 2 hours later, his briefcase in hand and his expression grim. Emma had clearly told him everything on the phone. He pulled a chair close to my bed and took out a legal pad, ready to document everything. "Margaret," he said gently, "I need you to tell me exactly what happened with the power of attorney documents. Did you ever sign anything giving Rebecca authority over your property?" "Never," I said firmly. "She brought papers to my house about 2 months ago. She tried to convince me to sign them, said it was just a precaution in case of medical emergency, but something felt wrong about it, so I refused. I told her I needed time to think, and I never brought it up again. I never signed any power of attorney for Rebecca, not for medical decisions, not for financial decisions, not for anything." David made notes, his pen moving quickly across the paper. "And you're certain about this? You weren't confused or medicated when these conversations happened?" "I'm certain," I said. "This was 2 months ago, long before my surgery, when I was completely healthy and clear-minded. I specifically remember refusing to sign because I wanted to consult with you first, and then I decided I didn't want to give her that power at all." "Then the documents she used are fraudulent," David said, "which means the house sale itself is potentially invalid. But here's the problem. Margaret proving fraud in court takes time. The title has already transferred. The buyers have already paid. Unwinding this sale will be complicated, expensive, and there's no guarantee we'll succeed before the legal system assumes the transaction was legitimate." I felt tears starting to form, the first tears I'd allowed myself since learning what Rebecca had done. So she wins? She steals my house with forged documents and just gets away with it? "I didn't say that," David replied, and there was something in his voice that made me look up. "I said it would be complicated, but there's something Rebecca doesn't know, something that might change everything." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, the same folder containing my new will, the will I'd signed just 2 days ago. "Rebecca moved fast, but she didn't move fast enough. Your new will was officially processed and filed yesterday at noon. By the time she completed the house sale at 9:45 a.m., she was no longer your primary beneficiary. She just didn't know it yet." Emma leaned forward, hope lighting up her face. "What does that mean? If Grandma's will changed before the sale was complete, does that affect anything?" David flipped through the papers in the folder. "It means that when Rebecca sold that house, she was acting under the assumption that she was protecting her own inheritance. She thought she was liquidating an asset that would eventually come to her anyway, just doing it on her timeline instead of waiting. But the house was no longer part of her inheritance. As of yesterday at noon, everything Margaret owns, including the proceeds from any property sales, belongs to Emma." The words hung in the air, their implications slowly becoming clear. Rebecca had stolen my house, had forged documents and rushed through a sale to get her hands on my assets. But in her haste, she'd stolen something that was no longer hers to inherit. She'd committed fraud for money that, legally, now belonged to her own daughter. So the $375,000, I said slowly, working through the logic, that money should go to Emma, not to Rebecca. Exactly, David confirmed. Rebecca has no legal claim to those funds. She may have orchestrated the sale, but she did so under false pretenses and with forged documents. And even if the sale itself somehow stands up in court, which I doubt, the money from that sale is part of your estate, which as of yesterday noon goes entirely to Emma upon your death. I looked at my granddaughter, this beautiful young woman who'd shown me more genuine love in the past week than her mother had in years. But I'm not dead, I said. The will doesn't take effect until I die. Right now, that money is still technically mine, and Rebecca has it. Which is why we need to act immediately, David said, his pen already moving across a fresh page of his legal pad. We need to freeze those accounts, file for emergency injunctions, and get law enforcement involved for the document fraud. Margaret, this is going to get ugly. Rebecca will fight back, and she'll probably claim you're mentally incompetent, that Emma is manipulating you, that your surgery has affected your judgment. Are you prepared for that fight? I thought about Rebecca as a little girl, how she used to climb into my lap and tell me I was the best mommy in the world. I thought about the day she graduated high school, how proud I'd been, how full of hope for her future. I thought about all the years I'd made excuses for her selfishness, convincing myself that she loved me even when her actions showed otherwise. And then I thought about waking up 3 days ago to discover she'd sold my house while I was unconscious, that she'd forged documents to steal from her own mother, that she'd declared me mentally unfit to strangers so she could take what I'd spent a lifetime building. I'm prepared, I said. Do whatever needs to be done. David nodded and stood up. I'll start the paperwork today. But Margaret, there's something else you need to know. When Rebecca finds out about the will change, when she realizes the money she thought was hers is actually Emma's, she's not going to accept it quietly. People who commit fraud over $300,000 don't just walk away when they're caught. This is going to escalate, and it might get dangerous. Dangerous. The word seemed absurd applied to my own daughter, but then again, a week ago I would have said it was absurd to think Rebecca would forge documents and sell my house without my knowledge. I clearly didn't know my daughter as well as I thought I did. What should I do? I asked, suddenly feeling very old and very tired. First, focus on recovering, David said. You just had major surgery, and stress is the last thing you need right now. Let me handle the legal aspects. Emma, I need you to be your grandmother's advocate here. Screen her calls, control who visits, and document everything. If Rebecca tries to contact Margaret, record it if possible. Anything she says might be relevant in court. After David left, Emma and I sat in silence for a long moment. Through the hospital room window, I could see the sun starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, the kind of sunset Tom and I used to watch from our porch that was no longer mine, on a house that now belonged to strangers. "Grandma," Emma said softly, "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry my mom did this to you. I'm sorry I didn't see it coming. I should have protected you." I reached out and took her hand. "This isn't your fault, sweetheart. And you did protect me. You brought me to the hospital when I couldn't breathe. You probably saved my life. Without you, I might have died at home, and Rebecca would have gotten everything anyway." "But the house is just a building," I interrupted, though saying the words hurt more than I wanted to admit. "What matters is that I'm alive, that you're here, and that we're going to fight this together. Rebecca may have won this battle, but the war isn't over. My phone, which had been charging on the bedside table, suddenly buzzed with a text message. Emma picked it up and her face changed as she read the screen. "It's from Mom," she said quietly. "Should I read it to you?" I nodded, steeling myself for whatever was coming. Emma's voice was flat as she read, "Mom, I heard you changed your will. We need to talk about this immediately. You're clearly not thinking straight after your surgery. I've consulted with doctors about post-surgical confusion and medication effects on judgment. For your own protection, I think we need to discuss guardianship options. Call me as soon as you get this." There it was. David had been right. Rebecca had found out about the will change, probably from the same title company or lawyer's office where records were filed, and she was already preparing her counterattack. Post-surgical confusion, medication effects, guardianship. She was building a legal case to have me declared incompetent, to override my will change, to maintain control of the money she'd stolen. "Don't respond," I told Emma. "Don't give her anything she can use against us." But even as I said it, I knew this was just the beginning. Rebecca wasn't going to accept losing $375,000 without a fight, and she had something I didn't have time. She'd already completed the house sale, already had access to the money. Even if we eventually won in court, even if we proved the documents were forged and the sale was fraudulent, she could spend or hide that money long before justice caught up with her. I closed my eyes, exhaustion finally overwhelming me. My chest hurt from the surgery, my head hurt from trying to process everything that had happened, and my heart hurt from the betrayal of my own daughter. But underneath the pain, underneath the exhaustion, I felt something else starting to grow, a cold, hard determination. Rebecca thought she'd won. She thought she'd outsmarted me, moved faster than I could respond, secured her prize before I could stop her. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated her own mother's will to fight back, and she'd underestimated how far I would go to protect the one person in my family who actually deserved protection. The war was just beginning, and I was nowhere near ready to surrender. I spent 5 more days in that hospital bed, 5 days of physical recovery while my mind raced with legal strategies and worst-case scenarios. David Morrison visited twice more, each time bringing documents for me to review and sign. Emergency motions to freeze Rebecca's accounts, affidavits stating I'd never signed power of attorney documents, a formal complaint with the police department alleging forgery and fraud. Each signature I made felt like a small act of war against my own daughter. Emma barely left my side. She'd taken time off from her job as a teacher to stay with me, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, eating cafeteria food, helping me to the bathroom when I was too weak to walk alone. Every time a nurse came to check my vitals, Emma was there taking notes, asking questions, making sure I received the best possible care. She was everything Rebecca should have been, but never was. On my 3rd day in the hospital, Rebecca tried to visit. I was dozing when I heard raised voices outside my room, Emma's firm tone and Rebecca's increasingly shrill protests. I kept my eyes closed and listened. "You're not going in there," Emma said. "Grandma doesn't want to see you." "She's my mother, and you have no right to keep me away from her." Rebecca's voice had that edge it always got when she wasn't getting her way, like a child about to throw a tantrum. I need to talk to her about important decisions that need to be made. Important decisions? Emma's laugh was harsh. "You mean like the decision to sell her house while she was unconscious? That kind of important decision?" There was a pause, and when Rebecca spoke again, her voice had changed to something softer, more manipulative. "Emma, honey, I know this looks bad from the outside, but you don't understand the full situation. Your grandmother has been declining for months. She's been making irrational choices, forgetting things, getting confused about her finances. Selling the house was necessary to protect her assets and ensure she has money for proper care. "She's not declining," Emma shot back. "She's sharper than both of us, and the only irrational thing she did was trust you. You're young. You don't understand how these things work. I understand fraud. I understand forgery. I understand that you stole from your own mother while she was fighting for her life." I heard footsteps, then Rebecca's voice much closer to my door. "Let me see her. If she tells me herself that she doesn't want to see me, then I'll leave, but I have a right to hear it from her." I opened my eyes and called out, my voice still weak but clear enough. "Emma, let her in." Emma appeared in the doorway, her face flushed with anger. "Grandma, you don't have to." "I know," I said, "but let her in. I want to hear what she has to say." Rebecca entered my room with a performance of concern that would have been Oscar-worthy if I didn't know better. Her face was arranged in an expression of worry, her movements careful and gentle as she approached my bed. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater and jeans, looking casual and approachable, probably deliberately chosen to appear non-threatening. "Mom," she said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. The hurt that flashed across her face might have even been genuine. "Mom, please, I know you're upset, but I need you to understand." "Understand what?" I interrupted. "Understand that you sold my house without my permission? Understand that you forged legal documents? Understand that you had me declared mentally incompetent to strangers so you could steal from me?" Rebecca's jaw tightened. "I didn't steal anything. That house was going to be mine eventually anyway. I just moved up the timeline for everyone's benefit, including yours. The maintenance costs alone were eating up your savings. The property taxes keep increasing. You couldn't handle that house anymore, and you were too stubborn to admit it. So you made that decision for me," I said, "while I was unconscious and couldn't stop you." "I made the practical decision," Rebecca corrected. "The responsible decision. Someone had to take care of things, and clearly it wasn't going to be you." She glanced at Emma with barely concealed contempt. "Or your granddaughter who's still teaching elementary school at 30 years old instead of having a real career." Emma's hands clenched into fists, but she didn't take the bait. I felt a surge of pride in her self-control. "Tell me about the power of attorney documents," I said. "The ones you used to authorize the sale. Where did you get those?" Rebecca's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Calculation, deciding how much to admit. "You signed them, Mom. 2 months ago when I came to visit. You were having one of your confused spells, and I explained that these were just precautionary measures." "I never signed them," I said flatly. "I specifically refused to sign them. You're lying, Rebecca, and we both know it." "You forgot," Rebecca said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone people use with elderly relatives they've decided are senile. "It's okay to forget things, Mom. It's part of aging. That's exactly why these protective measures were necessary." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and tried to find some trace of the little girl I'd raised. Where had I gone wrong? What had I done to create this person who could lie to my face while trying to steal everything I owned? "I've changed my will," I said. "Everything goes to Emma now. The house proceeds, my savings, everything. You get nothing." I watched Rebecca's face carefully as I said it. Watched the mask of concern slip for just a moment to reveal the fury underneath. Her hands, which had been clasped together in a gesture of supplication, tightened until her knuckles went white. "You can't do that," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You're not mentally competent to change your will. Any lawyer would confirm that making major legal decisions right after surgery while on pain medication is a sign of impaired judgment." "The will was changed before my surgery," I said, watching her face carefully. 24 hours before, actually, when I was completely clear-headed and not on any medication. My lawyer can confirm the exact timing and my mental state when I signed the documents." Rebecca stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "This is Emma's doing. She's manipulated you, turned you against your own daughter. She probably put these ideas in your head about me trying to steal from you." "Emma saved my life," I interrupted. "She brought me to the hospital when you told me it was probably just anxiety. If she hadn't acted, I would have died from those blood clots. And you know what? I think part of you was hoping for exactly that." The words hung in the air like an accusation too terrible to take back. Rebecca's face went white, then flushed dark red. "How dare you?" she whispered. "How dare you suggest I would want my own mother to die?" "You wanted my money," I said. "Whether I was alive or dead didn't really matter, as long as you got access to my assets. Isn't that right? The house sale proves it. You couldn't even wait until I was out of surgery, couldn't wait until I was conscious enough to have a conversation about it. You rushed it through the moment I couldn't stop you." Rebecca grabbed her purse and headed for the door, then turned back with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Pure, undisguised hatred. "You're going to regret this, Mom. I have lawyers, too. Good ones. And they're going to prove that you're mentally incompetent, that Emma has unduly influenced you, and that your will change is invalid. By the time we're done, you won't be allowed to make any decisions for yourself. You'll be in a state-run facility with a court-appointed guardian, and Emma will get nothing." She slammed the door on her way out, leaving Emma and me sitting in stunned silence. I'd known Rebecca would be angry, but I hadn't expected such naked hostility, such a complete abandonment of even pretending to care about me. "Grandma," Emma said softly, coming to sit beside my bed. "She's bluffing, right? She can't really do all that." I wished I could tell her yes, that it was just an empty threat, but I knew Rebecca too well. "She's going to try," I said. "She's going to fight us with everything she has, because $375,000 is worth fighting for." Over the next 2 days, David Morrison kept us updated on the legal proceedings. He'd filed our emergency motion to freeze Rebecca's accounts, but it had been denied. The judge ruled that without proof the power of attorney was forged, the house sale appeared legitimate, and Rebecca had legal access to the funds. We'd filed our police report alleging forgery, but the detective assigned to the case told David these investigations typically took months, sometimes years, and the burden of proof was on us to demonstrate the signatures weren't mine. "The problem," David explained during one of his visits, "is that Rebecca was smart about this. She used your regular bank, your usual title company, professionals you'd worked with before. To them, this looked like a standard transaction. They had no reason to question the documents because they appeared legitimate. Proving forgery means getting handwriting experts, comparing signatures, building a case that takes time and costs money." "How much money?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer would be more than I could afford. "Conservatively? $50,000 in legal fees, maybe more if this goes to trial. And that's not counting what Rebecca will spend fighting back." David pulled out more documents from his briefcase. "She's already hired a firm that specializes in elder law. They sent these to my office this morning." He handed me a thick stack of papers. I couldn't understand most of the legal language, but certain phrases jumped out at me. Petition for emergency guardianship, medical assessment of mental capacity, undue influence by third party. Rebecca was doing exactly what she'd threatened, trying to have me declared incompetent and put under court supervision. "They're requesting an emergency hearing," David explained. "They want a judge to immediately suspend your ability to make financial and medical decisions pending a full competency evaluation. If they succeed, everything gets frozen. Your accounts, your will, everything, until a court-appointed guardian is assigned." Can they really do that? Emma asked, her voice tight with worry. Can they just take away Grandma's rights like that? They can try, David said, but they'll need to present evidence that Margaret is genuinely unable to make her own decisions. Post-surgical confusion, medication effects, vulnerability to manipulation. These are all things they'll argue. We'll need to counter with evidence of Margaret's mental clarity, her sound reasoning for changing her will, and proof that she fully understood the decisions she was making. I looked down at the papers in my hands, at my daughter's name on the petition claiming I was too confused to manage my own life. This was really happening. My own child was trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could maintain control of the money she'd stolen from me. When is the hearing? I asked. Next week, Thursday at 2 p.m. The judge is expediting it because of Rebecca's claims that you're in immediate danger of being exploited. David's expression was grim. Margaret, I need to be honest with you. These hearings can go either way. You'll need to appear in person, answer questions from a judge, possibly undergo a mental status examination. If you're still recovering from surgery, if you appear weak or confused, if you're on pain medication, all of that works against us. Then I'll stop taking the pain medication, I said immediately. I need to be sharp for that hearing. Grandma, no, Emma protested. You're still healing. The doctors said I'd survive, and I have. I looked at David. What do I need to do to win this hearing? He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. First, we need medical documentation that you're mentally sound. I'll arrange for a neuropsychological evaluation and independent doctor who can assess your cognitive function and testify that you have full capacity to make decisions. Second, we need character witnesses who can speak to your mental clarity and sound judgment. Friends, neighbors, people who've interacted with you regularly. Third, we need to document Rebecca's history of financial pressure and manipulation. Every conversation, every demand, every instance of her trying to control your assets. I can help with that, Emma said. I've got text messages from Mom going back years, asking Grandma for money, pressuring her about the house. And Mrs. Chen, the neighbor, she witnessed some of Rebecca's visits. She told me she'd always thought Mom was too pushy about Grandma's finances. Over the next week, we built our case. The neuropsychologist, Dr. Patricia Wu, spent 3 hours with me conducting tests, memory exercises, logical reasoning problems, questions about my understanding of financial concepts and legal implications. She was thorough and kind, and when she finished, she looked at me with something like admiration. Mrs. Patterson, she said, you score in the 95th percentile for your age group in cognitive function. Your memory is sharp, your reasoning is sound, and you clearly understand the implications of your legal decisions. Anyone claiming you're mentally incompetent is either mistaken or deliberately lying. Those words felt like armor, like protection I could carry into the courtroom. David collected her written report and added it to our growing file of evidence. Emma reached out to my neighbors and friends, people I'd known for decades. Mrs. Chen came to the hospital to visit and promised to testify about Rebecca's suspicious behavior. My friend Dorothy from church, who I'd had lunch with just 2 weeks before my surgery, wrote a letter describing our conversation as lucid and intelligent. Even my mail carrier, who'd delivered to my house for 15 years, offered to speak about my consistent mental sharpness. But Rebecca was building her case too. I found out through David that she'd gotten statements from the emergency room staff about my condition when I arrived, the confusion, the difficulty breathing, the fear. She'd twisted those medical symptoms into evidence of mental decline. She'd found the bank records showing I'd given Emma $500 last month for her car repair and claimed it was evidence I was being financially exploited. She'd even gotten her husband, Emma's father, Jack, to sign a statement saying he was concerned about my judgment. That hurt almost as much as Rebecca's betrayal. Jack had always been kind to me, had spent Thanksgivings at my table, had called me Mom for 30 years, and now he was signing papers claiming I wasn't mentally fit to manage my own affairs. "He doesn't have a choice," Emma said when I expressed my hurt. "Mom probably threatened him, told him if he didn't support her, she'd make his life hell. Dad's never been good at standing up to her." The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I lay in my hospital bed. They'd kept me an extra week due to complications in my recovery, and thought about what tomorrow would bring. A courtroom, a judge, my daughter's lawyers trying to prove I was senile and confused, my entire future, my autonomy, my right to make my own decisions, all hanging in the balance. Emma stayed with me that night, holding my hand in the dark hospital room. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she whispered, "I want you to know I'm proud of you. You're the strongest person I know." I squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. Tomorrow I would face my daughter in court. Tomorrow I would fight for my right to give my own money to whoever I chose. Tomorrow I would prove that I was still Margaret Patterson, still sharp, still capable, still in control of my own life. And if I lost, if the judge decided Rebecca was right, that I was too confused to be trusted, then at least I would lose fighting, not surrendering, not letting my daughter steal my dignity along with my house. The war was about to enter its most critical battle, and I was as ready as I would ever be. Thursday morning arrived with gray skies and rain, as if the weather itself reflected the heaviness in my chest. Emma helped me dress in the navy blue suit I'd asked her to bring from home, or what used to be my home. The suit was a bit loose now. I'd lost weight during my hospital stay, but it made me look professional, competent, like someone who clearly had control of her mental faculties. David Morrison arrived at 10 a.m. to go over our strategy one final time. "Remember," he said, "answer only the questions asked. Don't elaborate unless necessary. Stay calm, even if Rebecca's lawyer tries to upset you. The judge will be watching your demeanor, your coherence, your ability to understand complex questions and provide rational answers." "I understand," I said, though my hands were shaking as I tried to button my jacket. Emma gently took over, fastening the buttons while I took deep breaths to steady my nerves. The courthouse was downtown, a 20-minute drive from the hospital. Emma pushed me in a wheelchair, David's idea, to show I was still recovering but present and willing to fight for myself. As we entered the building, I saw Rebecca standing near the courtroom doors with two people in expensive suits, undoubtedly her lawyers. She looked polished and professional in a black dress, her hair perfectly styled, playing the role of concerned daughter, forced to take difficult action to protect her declining mother. Our eyes met across the hallway. For a moment, I thought I saw something in her expression, regret, maybe, or uncertainty. But then her lawyer said something to her, and she turned away, the mask of professional concern sliding back into place. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic spaces I'd seen on television. The judge's bench dominated one end, with tables arranged facing it for each party. Judge Martha Hendricks entered precisely at 2 p.m., a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "This is an emergency petition for guardianship," she began, looking over her glasses at the assembled group. "I've reviewed the preliminary filings from both parties. Mrs. Patterson, I understand you're here voluntarily and wish to contest this petition?" I stood up from my wheelchair, waving away Emma's attempt to help me. I needed the judge to see me standing on my own, speaking for myself. "Yes, Your Honor. I absolutely contest it. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs." Judge Hendricks nodded. "Please be seated. We'll hear from the petitioner first." She gestured to Rebecca's lead attorney, a woman named Sandra Kowalski who looked to be in her 40s, with an expression of practiced sympathy. Your Honor, Kowalski began, this is a heartbreaking case of a beloved mother whose mental faculties have declined to the point where she's vulnerable to exploitation. Mrs. Patterson underwent emergency surgery just 2 weeks ago for life-threatening blood clots. In the immediate aftermath of that surgery, while still hospitalized and on significant pain medication, she made drastic changes to her will that completely disinherited her daughter, who had been caring for her for years, in favor of her granddaughter. I wanted to interrupt, to correct the lie about Rebecca caring for me, but David put a hand on my arm. "Let her finish," his expression said. "We'll get our turn." Kowalski continued, "The timing of this will change is highly suspicious. Mrs. Patterson was vulnerable, scared, fresh from surgery, and likely not thinking clearly. Her granddaughter, Emma, had unusual access to her during this time, visiting daily while Mrs. Patterson was in a weakened state. We believe this constitutes undue influence, a young woman taking advantage of her grandmother's medical crisis to secure an inheritance." "That's not what happened," I said loudly, unable to stop myself. David squeezed my arm harder. Judge Hendricks looked at me with a slight frown. "Mrs. Patterson, you'll have your opportunity to speak. Please allow counsel to finish." Kowalski pulled out documents and began presenting her evidence. Medical records showing my confusion when I arrived at the emergency room. Bank statements showing money I'd given Emma over the years. Testimony from Rebecca about my supposed memory lapses and confusion about finances. It was all twisted, all presented in the worst possible light, making me sound like a senile old woman being manipulated by a scheming granddaughter. Then Kowalski called Rebecca to testify. My daughter walked to the witness chair with perfect posture, her face composed in an expression of sad concern. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, and I found myself thinking bitterly about how easily she could lie while touching something sacred. "Ms. Patterson," Kowalski began, "can you describe your mother's mental state over the past 6 months?" Rebecca took a deep breath, as if gathering courage to say difficult things. "It's been declining gradually. Small things at first, forgetting conversations we'd had, asking me the same questions multiple times. She'd call me worried about bills she'd already paid. She got confused about dates and appointments. I tried to help her, to gently suggest that maybe she needed more support, but she resisted. Every word was a lie or a distortion. I'd never forgotten conversations. I'd never called her about bills, but I could see Judge Hendricks taking notes, her expression neutral but attentive. "And when did you become seriously concerned?" Kowalski asked. "About 2 months ago," Rebecca said, her voice cracking slightly excellent performance. "I visited her house and found her paperwork in complete disarray. Bills unpaid, important documents mixed in with junk mail. She was having trouble breathing but refused to see a doctor. She said she was fine, that I was overreacting, but I could see she wasn't fine. That's when I realized she needed someone to help make decisions for her own protection." "Did you attempt to obtain power of attorney to provide this protection?" "I did," Rebecca said. "I had documents prepared and explained to her that this was just a safety measure, so I could help if she had a medical emergency. She signed them. Though she was confused about what they meant, I had to explain several times." "I never signed them," I burst out, unable to contain myself. "That's a complete lie." Judge Hendricks banged her gavel once. "Mrs. Patterson, you will have your chance to testify. One more outburst and I'll have you removed from the courtroom." David leaned close and whispered urgently, "You have to stay calm. Outbursts make you look unstable. That's exactly what they want." I bit my lip hard and forced myself to sit back, but my whole body was trembling with rage. Rebecca was sitting in that witness chair, lying under oath, and I had to sit silently and listen. Kowalski continued her questioning, walking Rebecca through the house sale. painting it as a difficult but necessary decision made to protect my assets. According to Rebecca's version, I had been enthusiastic about selling, had agreed it was too much house for me to maintain, had thanked her for handling the complicated process. Then came the question I'd been dreading. And what happened when you learned your mother had changed her will? Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, actual tears. I couldn't believe it. I was devastated, not because of the money, but because it showed how much my own mother had turned against me. Emma had convinced her that I was trying to steal from her, had poisoned her mind against me. My mother, who I love more than anything, now looks at me like I'm some kind of criminal. It was a masterful performance. Even I almost believed her, and I knew the truth. Judge Hendricks was watching Rebecca with what looked like sympathy, and I felt my chances slipping away. Finally, it was our turn. David called me to the witness stand, and I walked there without assistance, determined to show strength. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. And unlike my daughter, I actually meant it. David started with easy questions: my name, my age, my address. Then he moved to more complex topics. Mrs. Patterson, can you explain why you changed your will? I looked directly at Judge Hendricks as I answered, because I finally saw my daughter clearly for what she is. For years, I made excuses for her selfishness. I told myself that her constant demands for money were just temporary, that she'd eventually become independent. I convinced myself that her lack of interest in my life — she visited maybe once a month, usually when she needed something — was just because she was busy. What changed? David asked. She came to visit with power of attorney documents and pressured me to sign them. Something felt wrong about it, so I refused. The way she reacted to that refusal, the anger in her eyes, even though she tried to hide it, made me realize she didn't see me as her mother. She saw me as an asset she needed to control. Did you ever sign those documents? Never, I said firmly. I specifically refused, and I never changed my mind. Whatever documents she used to sell my house were forged. I'm certain of that. David pulled out Dr. Wu's neuropsychological evaluation. Your Honor, I'd like to submit this assessment into evidence. Dr. Patricia Wu examined Mrs. Patterson and found her cognitive function to be in the 95th percentile for her age group. Her report explicitly states that Mrs. Patterson has full mental capacity to make legal and financial decisions. He handed copies to the judge and to Kowalski, who frowned as she scanned the pages. Mrs. Patterson, David continued, can you explain your financial relationship with your granddaughter, Emma? Emma has never asked me for money, I said. The only time I've given her any was when her car broke down last month and she needed $500 for repairs. She tried to refuse it, insisted she could take the bus until she saved up enough. I had to practically force her to accept it. Compare that to Rebecca, who has taken over $30,000 from me in the past 3 years alone. Rent payments, car payments, emergency expenses that were never emergencies. Kowalski stood up. Objection, Your Honor. This characterization of Ms. Patterson's financial needs is... It's the truth, I interrupted, then remembered David's warning about staying calm. I apologize, Your Honor, but it is the truth. I have bank records documenting every transfer. Judge Hendricks looked at me thoughtfully. Mrs. Patterson, I'm going to ask you some direct questions, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you understand that if I grant this guardianship petition, you will lose the right to make your own financial and medical decisions? I understand completely, I said, and I'm here to fight against that because I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions. Do you understand why your daughter believes you need a guardian? I understand that she wants control of my money, I said bluntly. She sold my house without my permission, forged legal documents to do it, and now that she's discovered I changed my will to protect my assets from her, she's trying to have me declared incompetent so she can override that will change. This isn't about protecting me. It's about protecting her access to my money." "That's a serious accusation," Judge Hendricks said. "It's a serious situation," I replied. "My daughter committed fraud, Your Honor. She forged my signature on power of attorney documents I specifically refused to sign, and used them to sell my house while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. She did this knowing I had just changed my will to remove her as beneficiary. The timing wasn't coincidental. She moved fast to get her hands on my assets before the will change could stop her." Kowalski jumped up. "Your Honor, these allegations of forgery are unsubstantiated. The documents in question have not been authenticated," David interrupted. "We've requested a handwriting analysis, which Mrs. Patterson's daughter has refused to cooperate with." Judge Hendricks held up her hand for silence. "Mrs. Patterson, when exactly did you change your will?" "The day before my surgery," I said. "I was at my lawyer's office at 10:15 a.m. on Tuesday. I was completely clear-headed. I hadn't even been diagnosed with the blood clots yet. I made the appointment specifically because I wanted to protect my assets from my daughter's manipulation." "And the surgery was when?" "Tuesday afternoon. I collapsed around 2 p.m. and was rushed to the hospital. The will change was processed and filed Wednesday at noon. Rebecca sold my house Wednesday morning at 9:45 a.m., 3 hours before my will change became official." I watched the judge's expression as she processed this timeline. I could see her mind working, seeing the same pattern I'd seen, Rebecca racing to liquidate my assets before losing her inheritance rights. "Your Honor," David said, "Mrs. Patterson made a rational, premeditated decision to change her will before her medical emergency. She recognized a pattern of financial exploitation by her daughter and took legal steps to protect herself. The fact that she had a medical crisis shortly after doesn't invalidate that decision. If anything, it proves her judgment was sound. She anticipated exactly the kind of behavior her daughter exhibited." Judge Hendricks was silent for a long moment, looking between me and Rebecca. Then she spoke. "I'm going to take a brief recess to review these documents more carefully. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. Emma held my hand in the hallway outside the courtroom, while David made phone calls and reviewed his notes. Rebecca stood at the opposite end of the hall with her lawyers, their heads close together in urgent conversation. I tried not to look at her, tried not to think about the fact that my own daughter was fighting to take away my rights. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Hendricks looked serious. "I've reviewed the evidence presented by both parties, and I've considered Mrs. Patterson's testimony carefully. This is not an easy decision." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "However," the judge continued, "I find that Mrs. Patterson demonstrates clear mental capacity. Her testimony was coherent, detailed, and showed sophisticated understanding of complex legal and financial matters. The neuropsychological evaluation supports this finding. Furthermore, the timeline of events raises serious questions about the petitioner's motivations." Rebecca's face went pale. The fact that Mrs. Patterson changed her will before her medical emergency, and that the house sale occurred in the narrow window before that will change became official, suggests calculated action rather than protective concern. I am denying the petition for guardianship. Mrs. Patterson retains full legal capacity to manage her own affairs. Relief flooded through me so intensely I felt dizzy. Emma squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, but I didn't care. "However," Judge Hendricks continued, and my relief faltered, "I am deeply troubled by the allegations of document forgery. I'm ordering a formal investigation into the authenticity of the power of attorney documents used in the house sale. If those documents are found to be fraudulent, criminal charges may follow. Furthermore, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order preventing any party from dispersing or hiding the proceeds from the house sale until the forgery investigation is complete." Rebecca stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. "Your Honor, this is—" "Ms. Patterson, sit down," the judge said sharply. "You should be grateful I'm not holding you in contempt right now for what appears to be perjury during your testimony. This hearing is adjourned." As the judge left the courtroom, Rebecca turned to look at me. The mask was completely gone now. There was no pretense of concern, no fake tears, just pure hatred in her eyes. She looked at me like I was an enemy who had just won a battle in a war that wasn't over. And she was right. This wasn't over. The judge had frozen the money, had ordered an investigation, but Rebecca still had access to expensive lawyers and the $375,000 she'd already moved. The fight was far from finished. But I had won today. I had proven my competence, protected my autonomy, and exposed Rebecca's manipulation for what it was. And for the first time since I woke up in that hospital bed to learn my house was gone, I felt something other than fear and betrayal. I felt powerful, I felt vindicated, and I felt ready for whatever came next. As Emma wheeled me out of the courthouse into the rain, David walking beside us reviewing what would happen next with the forgery investigation, I looked up at the gray sky and thought about my husband Tom. He'd always said I was stronger than I believed, that when pushed, I could fight harder than anyone expected. He was right, and Rebecca was about to find out exactly how hard her mother could fight when everything she loved was on the line. The war wasn't over, but I'd just won the most important battle, and I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Word count, 3,247. Win down, final 300 words. 3 months have passed since that courtroom victory, and the investigation has finally concluded. The handwriting experts confirmed what I always knew. The signatures on those power of attorney documents weren't mine. Rebecca forged them, or had someone forge them, and used those fraudulent documents to steal my house. She's been charged with forgery and fraud. Her lawyers are negotiating a plea deal, but the damage is done. The house sale has been voided, the buyers compensated from Rebecca's personal assets, and the property returned to my estate. I've already signed it over to Emma, who cried when I told her she now owns the house she grew up visiting. The house where we made so many memories. Rebecca hasn't spoken to me since the hearing. I've heard through mutual friends that she's telling people I'm a vindictive old woman who turned against her own daughter. Maybe some people believe her. I don't care anymore. What I've learned through all of this is that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and family isn't just about genetics. Emma has been more of a daughter to me in these past months than Rebecca was in 50 years. She's moved into the house to help me recover, and we're building a life together based on actual love, not financial obligation. I'm 72 years old. I survived blood clots, emergency surgery, betrayal by my own child, and a legal battle that could have cost me everything. I'm still here, still sharp, still fighting, and I'm finally free. If you're watching this and you've ever doubted yourself, ever let someone make you feel weak or incompetent, remember this: you are stronger than they want you to believe. Trust your instincts, protect what's yours, and never, ever let anyone, not even family, steal your dignity along with your assets. End of script. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. View my videos.